Hi, everyone. This is Rohit from Rise to Mastery. Today, I'm excited to have Roshan Patel, who's the founder and CEO of Walnut, a lending platform that makes healthcare more affordable for patients by breaking up large medical bills into small monthly payments. Before Walnut, Roshan served as a principal at HL Ventures, and before joining HL Ventures, he was an associate at Space Capital, a venture fund focused on early stage companies in the space industry, where he led the sourcing and diligence of new investment opportunities for the fund. Roshan holds a MS in Finance from Vanderbilt University and a BS in Mathematics from George Washington University. He currently sits on the board of Children's Scholarship Fund as a mentor at Venture for America. Welcome to the show, Roshan.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So, you have an interesting journey. Before the call, we talked to you. You're born and brought up in UK. You came to US. You were in the venture capital. Then you got into startups. Yeah. How did the entire journey start? And what led you into starting Walnut?
Yeah, absolutely. Out of college, I actually started as a quant trader at a hedge fund, so more of the traditional finance world, and actually did not really enjoy it so much. I did not find it very fulfilling. We were mostly very profit driven, so we're not really creating a product or having much impact on the world. And I thought, this is not what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I did enjoy the investing aspect. And, this was around like 2015, 2016. So, the rise of like Uber, Snapchat, Airbnb, like, really impressive startups that were really reaching scale. So I thought investing in startups might be fun. And so that was kind of the moment I learned about venture capital and the world of startups. And so that's when I transitioned into VC. So, spent the last 4 or 5 years in VC, investing in everything from like, plastic alternatives to space companies, just really a wide range of stuff. So that was kind of my journey from, college to VC. And then in my time in VC, like I was really interested in fintech naturally, just given that was my traditional, finance background. And like most founders, you experience a problem and then you want to solve that problem. And so actually a few years ago, I had a family member get a very large medical bill, and just going through the process of negotiating it and disputing it with the hospital was pretty terrible. So I thought there must be a better way to solve this, in a much more patient-friendly way than like harassing someone into paying a medical bill. So I went down this rabbit hole of healthcare payments, talked to dozens of patients and healthcare providers. And the farther down the rabbit hole I went, the more broken I realized it was. And so I thought to myself, if no one's going to come up with a solution to this, maybe I should. And so that was about a year ago. And, Walnut was officially born in October of last year.
Oh, very interesting. You started in the middle of the pandemic, and you've talked about you were in the VC world. You worked there for a couple of years. What made what is the transition? What is the mindset which is required to go from being a VC to an operator and an owner, or did you feel like you should have stayed in the VC industry for a couple of more years?
Yeah, I think most people end up going the opposite journey. Like they are at a startup very early or a founder and then go to VC. And I went the opposite way, which is very atypical. But I think it actually helped me a lot because as a VC, you have like a bird's eye view into many different companies, your portfolio companies, and there's many different industries, many different challenges. So I think I became a very good generalist where like I can sit down in a meeting and like contribute valuable, insight into a marketing problem or a sales problem or a finance or ops problem. Like you're kind of relevant across everything, which is really important if you're going to start a company. Like you have to kind of be a jack of all trades. And then it also definitely helps with fundraising because you know how VCs think and what they want to hear and how to think about de-risking your company. So I think it was very valuable to have myself as a former VC as part of the co-founding team of Walnut.
Interesting. And, you're part of Space Capital and HL Ventures, what are some of the learnings you have had as a VC, especially into space capital? It's a very interesting space, but something which I'm not that aware of. But looking at Elon Musk and a lot of lot of interesting startups which coming out of out in the space world. What were your learnings from both these VC firms?
Yeah, there's a ton. There's so many. I think maybe the biggest thing I learned was, when I was a quant trader at a hedge fund, everything was very data driven. Like you have so many metrics and financials to analyze. And in VC world, that does not exist. Like a lot of times you're investing in companies that are pre-product. They don't have any revenue to look at. And so, especially in the space industry where you might take like several years to get to market and then several years beyond that to start generating revenue, it all becomes about the team and just being able to assess founders and their slope. Like, where do you see them like in 5 years, 100 years, 10 years from now? Like, can you lead a team of 100 people? And can this person lead a company that's going to be billions of dollars? Being able to like see not just who they are today, but where they are in the future and their potential, I think is really important.
Interesting. And Walnut is a lending platform which for healthcare, where you do not charge fees or interest to customers. But how do you make money if you're not charging fees from customers?
Yeah, it was really important to us not to increase the cost of healthcare any more than it already is, because it is so absurdly expensive and broken in this country. So we decided not to try and pass costs on to the patient, but rather the healthcare provider. So we charge healthcare providers a merchant fee or transaction fee, which is essentially a % of the bill. And that's how we make money.
Got it. And I'm based out of UK. I understand how the NHS works, but just for the context for listeners, how does the healthcare system work in US? And you've talked about it's pretty much broken, but for international listeners who want to understand about the whole concept, can you deep dive more into how the entire system works? Because from what I understand is like people do pay for the healthcare charges, but don't they get the services which is needed?
Yeah, absolutely. So unlike most countries in Europe and parts of Asia where the government subsidizes a lot of healthcare, that's not so much the case in the US. So usually individuals are responsible for getting insurance, and that's typically offered through their employer. Even if you have insurance, you still have what are called deductibles or copays. So you do incur a lot of costs, even if you have insurance. And then there's a whole subset of the population that is uninsured. And so any time they go into the healthcare system, they are incurring a large cost. And then there are a lot of aspects about the healthcare system in terms of its pricing and how costs are determined, which are very inflated relative to other countries. So you'll see like news articles, which are basically horror stories of someone getting like a simple treatment that ends up being $10,000 just due to the intricacies of the healthcare system. But I'd say like compared to most other countries, you will incur more yearly costs out of pocket in the US than anywhere else.
Interesting. And how does the company decide how much loan should a customer get from your platform? Do you look into some sort of analytics to decide that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to expand financial access to healthcare and really reduce or eliminate the financial burden that patients incur when they receive that healthcare. So our goal is to be able to approve more patients for Walnut than any other financial company. And part of that is looking at data that other companies are not looking at. So when we determine how much a loan a customer should get, we look at thousands of data points in real time. That can be credit bureau data, that can be footprint data, or bank transaction history. That can be data we get from the healthcare provider. And we basically look at all those data points and shove them through a machine learning algorithm, which helps us determine how much we can approve a patient for.
Oh, interesting. And who would be an ideal customer for Walnut? If you can talk about the customer persona, just to understand, or how do you go about capturing the audience for Walnut?
Yeah, I'd say like unlike most startups, which try and come up with a very specific customer archetype, We didn't really do that because healthcare is so broad. It affects essentially everyone in the world. And you don't really know that you need something like Walnut until it happens to you. So like whether you're a 20-something-year-old young professional in New York or a 60-something-year-old retired person in the Midwest, you're gonna experience the cost of healthcare in some way. So we really make sure like whatever product we're building works for the majority of Americans out there because almost everyone's gonna need this. However, like most of our customers fall into one of a couple buckets. So that can be you're uninsured and just are susceptible to large healthcare costs, or you're on a high deductible plan, which means you have to pay usually several $1,000s yourself before your insurance starts covering any healthcare costs.
Got it. And I wanted to understand, when you started acquiring your customers, was it more word of mouth, or was it more like paid acquisition channels that you looked at to acquire your first customers?
Yeah, I'd say it was just hustling through friends, family, investor networks, really just trying to get warm introductions to healthcare providers and patients that had experienced large medical bills. We actually were pretty intentional about not really spending anything on marketing so early on and being very capital efficient with how we were spending that budget because we didn't want to conflate early users if we were spending on marketing with value from our product, or just because we spent a lot of money on ads. Like we want to make sure what we're building is actually valuable before we start spending money on paid acquisition.
Got it. I've been part of a company called OYO Rooms where I was looking at medical tourism. So I understand, acquiring a customer can be expensive, especially in the medical industry. But you've raised a bit of a capital. How do you look at allocating marketing spend and your resources efficiently going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way our business model works is actually B2B2C. So we partner with the healthcare provider, which is more of a B2B sales process, who then offers us to their patients. So we actually don't really have any direct consumer marketing budget at the moment. Eventually we will. I think, when we raise our future rounds, we'll definitely allocate some of that budget to direct to consumer acquisition. Because I think it is helpful to have that organic word of mouth where customers are aware of Walnut when they step into their healthcare provider's office and they ask their healthcare provider, hey, do you guys offer Walnut? And the healthcare provider's like, oh, what's that? Like, let me research that. So it's kind of a tool to help us acquire more healthcare providers in that sense, almost like a viral growth loop in a sense. But at the moment, our marketing budget is zero.
Oh, got it. And you talked about B2B partnerships. What is the sales pipeline, and how much time does it take for you to acquire a customer, acquire a paid customer?
Yeah. So the tricky part about B2B sales in healthcare is that it is incredibly hard to get a doctor on the phone. Like even if you're a patient of a doctor, it's really hard to get them on a phone and like schedule an appointment. So to like call them up and like try and sell them something, it just like turns the difficulty up to 11. So our sales process is like a combination of cold outreach through email, phone, LinkedIn. We also do have a fair number of patients coming to us organically, just searching like, what do I do if I get a large medical bill? And we've kind of optimized our site for SEO, so we show up there. But yeah, patients come to us, about 10 per day, and just send us their medical bill. And all we do is just reach out to their healthcare provider and say, hey, we have a patient that got a really large medical bill from you. Can we, help the patient pay it? And so that's basically our sales process. We get the doctor on the phone that way. And usually after 1 or 2 20-minute phone calls, they agree to work with us. So it can take anywhere from like 1 day to like 7 days on average.
Oh, okay. Got it. Interesting. And I want to understand, what are the, since you started last year, what are the kind of revenues you're looking at projecting for 21, 22, and what do you think about the unit economics, especially in this particular space?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, we're working with a handful of healthcare providers across the US. So we've got about 80 in our network at the moment. hoping to scale that to a few hundred by this time next year. In terms of unit economics, so I mentioned we make money by charging the healthcare provider a percentage of the bill. So usually that percentage ranges based on the type of healthcare being provided and that provider's specific financial situation. So like, for example, their current collections rate is part of the equation when determining what their transaction fee should be. But typically it'll range between 5% on the low end to 80% on the high end. So what's crazy is the average collections rate for a hospital for out-of-pocket costs is 20%. So for a hospital, they are making 20 cents on the dollar, which is pretty crazy. That's like you're implicitly paying an 80% transaction fee currently. So if we go to them and say, hey, we can increase your collections rate from 20% to 40%, or doubling your collections rate, that translates to a 60% transaction fee for us. So pretty huge variance, but that's our revenue. So let's say on average, it's like a 20% transaction fee. Our cost is essentially our default rate. So how many patients end up getting a payment plan from us, but then do not end up paying us back. And so as long as our transaction fee is greater than our default rate, we are profitable. So that's the unit economic equation.
Got it. And for a CEO, it's important to ensure that there's always cash in the bank, and you're always looking at raising money. But it's important to acquire great talent as well. Since COVID had been an inflection point where people have gone to their homes, and it's mostly remote for a lot of companies. Now, how do you look at acquiring the best of talent, especially in these times?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been very capital efficient, I'd say, since we raised our seed round. So we've made 4 hires since we raised our seed round. So we're a team of 7 currently, and we've basically indexed on culture fit. So making sure the people that we're hiring are extremely passionate about the mission and vision and problem that we're trying to solve. And I think there's also a huge opportunity to basically arbitrage the talent market, where we're trying to look for talent that no one else is looking at, or if they are looking at them, they're just misevaluating them. So for example, if you haven't gone to an Ivy League school, or you had a GPA of less than 3.7, or you live in the Midwest, like, we are happy to interview you and consider you for Walnut. And that resume might just get auto rejected at another tech company. So I think there's a huge opportunity to find really talented individuals who are very passionate about Walnut that no one else is looking at.
No, I really like that. The culture is very important these times, and it's been a year for you that you've been building the company. How do you look at your decision-making process, especially when you started off and now you have a team of 7 people? What has changed in the decision-making in the last couple of months and year?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's been fairly easy is how we make decisions at Walnut all starts with our mission and vision and our values. So that acts as our North Star whenever we make a decision. And basically, we started Walnut with experiencing the problem from the patient side of a large medical bill. And so basically, anytime we're making a sales, marketing, product, engineering decision, we just ask ourselves, is this good for the patient? Right? And that really just acts as an easy filter to determine whether or not an idea is worth pursuing. And if it's not good for the patient, we just throw it out. And so that's basically an easy way or decision-making process for us at Walnut.
Got it. And entrepreneurs are known as people who are risk takers. But how do you assess risk once you've started a company and you're in the journey of building the company? Do you think you become less? You become risk averse, or how do you look at risk, and how do you look at a potential? Considering that you're always looking at raising capital, growing the company, how do you assess risk these times?
Yeah, I think every time you end up fundraising, you have to de-risk certain aspects of the company. So at the earliest stages, really all you need to have de-risked is the team and, maybe the market. Like there's demand for what you're offering. But then once you raise your next round, maybe you have to start de-risking, your go-to-market strategy or your unit economics or your revenue, right? Every round you start to de-risk more and more of the company. So that's kind of the framework we use when we're thinking about fundraising and the levels of risk that we're taking. So for us, we're somewhere between, seed and our Series A round. So, at the moment we've been focused on launching and getting our product in the market and seeing what's valuable for users, and just being really focused on top line revenue growth. And I think at a certain point, before our next round, it'll start to, become more of a question about profitability and making sure, the payment plans that we're giving out are actually, viable to be making money off of. So that's kind of how we think about risk.
Got it. And, Walnut has raised a seed round from, really high quality investors. We've talked about Gaurav Jain from Afford, who's also a past guest on the podcast. And how did you decide to get, who should be on the cap table? And, what is your advice to founders who are looking to raise funds from really high quality investors, especially in the seed round?
Yeah, we looked for two things. So the first was just a real passion for our mission and vision, and for the problem that we're solving. So really wanted to make sure that they were in it for the long run and wanted to see us, change how healthcare is paid for in this country. And the second was their ability to help us. So Walnut is somewhat unique in that we're at the intersection of two very highly regulated and complicated industries, financial services and healthcare. And so having investors that are able to help on one of those two sides, and ideally both, a lot of our investors are very knowledgeable about both, was very valuable to us. So passion, ability to help. And my advice to founders would be, it's an honor to have any of these investors invest in your company, but you should also think about it from the other side. So it should be an honor for the investors to be a part of your journey. And so really try and vet them for their ability to help and make connections for you and help you grow.
Got it. And also, before the call, I mentioned I was part of OnDeck Podcast Fellowship, and they really helped me out in the distribution part. So it was a great experience for me. How was your experience at OnDeck? And do you think, platforms like OnDeck and Y Combinator can really, replace the universities?
Absolutely. I mean, my experience was incredible. I think anytime you put, 100 smart people in the same room, incredible things are going to happen. And so I did OnDeck almost 2 years ago now, and I'm still in touch with a lot of the people in my cohort, even from other future cohorts, and just learned a ton in the 2 years that I've been a part of OnDeck. And maybe if I'm an 18-year-old right now, I would probably consider paying $1,000 for OnDeck versus, $200,000 for university. I think that is actually a very hard decision to make. And I think more and more we'll start to see people go the OnDeck or Y Combinator or just general startup route rather than even enrolling in university.
And I believe you were also part of a Plaid Accelerator. Or do you think accelerators like Plaid and Y Combinator really do help out? And how was your general experience over there?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great experience. I think having the mentorship, guidance, and ongoing support of one of the most successful and important fintech companies ever is really helpful to have if you're starting a fintech company. But regardless of the accelerator, I think you'll probably develop a strong network of advisors, peers, mentors, connections to VCs, but probably most importantly, just the other founders in the accelerator with you. I've learned a ton about just aspects of building a startup from the other founders in the cohort and accelerator with me, that will last long after the accelerator is over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think such accelerators and such communities do really help out. Roshan, I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Yeah, I think it's probably Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. So she was a former poker player who wrote this book, and basically is trying to apply a lot of poker concepts to business. But it really helped me frame like the question of like how much risk do you take on, and how do you make decisions, which was one of your earlier questions. Basically, like the key takeaway from the book is you can separate the quality of the decision from the quality of the outcome. So you can make a great decision based on the information available to you at the time, but still get a bad outcome. But that means it still might have been a good decision at the time. So just being able to like separate those two and, you know, make them distinct is really important. And basically in poker, as long as you're making positive expected value bets, you're going to come out ahead in the long run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think taking a bets really helps out in entrepreneurship and in life as well. And do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Yeah, actually one I came across recently that kind of changed my life is this Chrome extension called Workona, which is like a tab management tool. So like, if you're like me, you have 1,000 tabs open in Chrome and it's like really hard to find anything. And like anytime you turn off your computer, you're like, wow, I just lost 1,000 tabs. So what Workona does is it lets you set up like different groups of tabs and then switch between them. So like I'll have a set of 5 tabs for sales and a set of 5 tabs for recruiting. And like I can switch between them very easily. And it basically just made me so much more productive. And I can like easily switch context of what I'm working on within Chrome very easily.
No, I think that's the first one. I'm going to really check this out later, and we're going to put that in the show notes. And Roshan, if you could go back in time when you started Walnut, what is the one thing you focused on or done anything differently?
Yeah, I think I would have spent more time becoming a better writer. I think for me, I studied math and science and was always like into numbers and quantitative stuff, and I hated reading and writing in school. But realizing like as a founder, a lot of your time is spent either in meetings, or if you're not in meetings, you're writing. So like I'm usually writing emails, I'm like writing messages on Slack, writing investor updates, I'm writing content for our site, I'm writing documentation or plans or strategy, and I'm terrible at writing. So like I would become a much better writer, and I think I'd be a much better founder if I was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've read one of your tweets where you talked about it. Additional one for you, because you've been acting on Twitter. I really like the engagement you have it over there. How much time do you spend on Twitter, and what is the best strategy people can develop to be better on Twitter and write much better over there?
Yeah, I've used Twitter as a way to get better at writing, and I think I probably spend like 10 to 15 minutes every morning, but it's paid off much more than that. So like I've made hires from Twitter. I've gotten sales from Twitter. I've learned a ton from Twitter. I've made, random investor connections through Twitter. So to me, Twitter is what LinkedIn should have been for startups and tech. And that's kind of how I use it, like professional networking, essentially.
Got it. And do you also focus on DMs or more about the threads, and what is the entire process when you're looking at using Twitter?
Yeah, I use it both. So like I tweet myself, just learning in public, essentially. Like anything interesting I learn, I try and tweet out and get others to comment and refine my thinking. And then I also get a lot of DMs and direct message a lot of other people, and just try and set up networking that way and just see what comes of it.
Yeah, no, awesome. I think Twitter is something which I've started using more, and I'm definitely going to deep dive more into some of the best strategies and learn from your Twitter space and how to get better on that. Roshan, what is the best way people can know about Walnut and know more about you?
Yeah, best way to contact me is on Twitter, most likely.
Got it. And if they want to reach out to Walnut, so what is the website, and how can they reach out there?
Yeah, Walnut website is hellowalnut.com. My email is roshan@hellowalnut.com, and on Twitter I'm just at Roshan Patel.
Got it. Roshan, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.